Jack Nicklaus has 18 major championships. He's the most decorated golfer who ever lived, and for most of his career, very few players ever made him feel like they had the better of him. But ask Nicklaus who gave him the hardest time on a golf course. And the name that comes up isn't Arnold Palmer, it isn't Tom Watson. The man Nicklaus himself once called his toughest rival was Lee Trevino. Of all my contemporaries, Nicklaus once said, Trevino was the hardest to beat. That's exactly what this video is about, what the best players in the world have said about Lee Trevino across 5 decades. To understand why those quotes from other golfers carry so much weight, you need to understand where Trevino came from and how little anyone expected from him. He grew up poor in Texas, raised mostly by his mother and grandfather. He didn't finish school. He learned golf the way a lot of hustlers did back in the day, playing money games for whatever was in his pocket, sometimes with nothing left if he lost. He eventually made his way onto the PGA Tour with a swing nobody had taught him and an accent that made him stand out in country club locker rooms that weren't built for guys like him. By the time he won his first US Open in 1968, most of the golf world still saw him as a sideshow, funny, fast-talking, and completely unteachable. That reputation didn't last, and the first person to quietly burst it was the last person anyone expected, Ben Hogan. Ben Hogan didn't hand out compliments. He was famously guarded, even cold, and almost never praised other players, including ones he was supposed to be mentoring. So when Trevino, still largely unknown, was hitting balls on the range at Colonial one day, and Hogan walked over without being asked, it meant something. "I'm just here to watch you hit that golf ball the way you do," Hogan told him. That's it. No lesson, no advice, just Ben Hogan standing there, watching. And it didn't stop at the range. Years later, when Hogan was developing a new line of clubs under his own name, he wanted them tested before they went to market. According to the people who worked with him, his instructions were simple. "Take this set over to Dallas," Hogan would say, "and let that little Mexican boy hit him." If Ben Hogan trusted your hands enough to put his name on the line, that told you something about where you stood. Hogan respected Trevino from a distance, but on tour, respect worked differently, and it usually had to be earned the hard way. Johnny Miller found that out early. When Miller was a young player just arriving on tour, Trevino, who was already established by that time, started needling him, the way veterans sometimes test rookies to see what they're made of. Miller didn't fold. He gave it right back. "He never bothered me again after that," Miller said, in front of all those people. And once Miller proved he could hold his own, the relationship shifted from rivalry into something closer to mutual respect. Years later, Miller credited Trevino with one of the best pieces of advice he ever received, a simple trick for playing under pressure. When you're nervous, hit the ball low, because a low shot doesn't have time to drift offline. "That's one of the greatest pieces of advice you can imagine," Miller said. Then, by the early 1970s, Trevino and Nicklaus weren't just playing in the same tournaments. They were colliding in them, over and over, with majors on the line. Across a 7-year stretch, Nicklaus finished runner-up to Trevino in 4 different major championships. Nicklaus later put it plainly when talking about the players he considered his true rivals. "I couldn't control Arnold Palmer, Gary Player, Tom Watson, or Lee Trevino. The only person I could control was me." That's Trevino, in the same sentence as Palmer and Watson, players whose rivalries with Nicklaus are practically written into golf history. But the line that really reframes everything came later, relayed through Nicklaus's own longtime coach. Trevino heard about it secondhand, and by his own account, it stopped him in his tracks. "Of all my contemporaries," Nicklaus said, "Trevino was the hardest to beat. For a player who spent his whole career being introduced as the funny one, that's about as serious a piece of praise as golf has to offer." But here's where the story gets uncomfortable. because everything that made Trevino the hardest to beat came at someone else's expense. In 1972, at the Open Championship at Muirfield, Trevino was locked in a final round battle with Tony Jacklin, Britain's biggest golf star at the time. While Nicklaus chased both of them from behind, one win away from a shot at the Grand Slam. On the 17th hole, Trevino, from an awkward lie, well off the green, and chipped in. Jacklin was left rattled, and he three-putted from close range for a bogey. Trevino held on to win by a single shot over Nicklaus. Jacklin finished third. It was the kind of shot that gets replayed for decades as a highlight. But for Jacklin, it wasn't a highlight. It was the moment everything changed. "The heart was ripped out of me," Jacklin said. "I was honestly never the same again." He was 28 years old. He never seriously contended in a major again. So, the same shot that gets cited as proof of Trevino's genius is, for someone else, the moment his career quietly ended. You'd think a story like that would belong to one era and stay there, but Trevino's reputation didn't fade with time. If anything, it traveled forward, picked up by players who never even competed against him. In December 2021, at the PNC Championship, an 82-year-old Trevino spent part of an afternoon on the range with Tiger Woods and Tiger's son, Charlie, not really giving a lesson, just talking, the way he always has. Tiger stood there and watched. "I got a chance to be around Lee quite a bit early in my career," Tiger said afterward, "and to see the quality of strike. The guy is 82 years old. Come on. It's not what it used to be. But he finds the middle of the face each and every time." And then Tiger added, "He's the best. He's the best ever." Around the same time, Will Zalatoris, one of the best ball strikers on tour right now, went looking for Trevino specifically to ask him about shaping shots. He came away calling Trevino one of the best golfers of all time and described watching him still putting in work on the range in his 80s, hitting just a handful of balls with every club before calling it a day. And when Jim Thorpe, a tour veteran who spent a lifetime around the game, was asked who he'd met that knew the most about golf, his first instinct was to say Ben Hogan. Then he stopped himself. "Hogan and Trevino," he corrected. "And there's Gary Player. And believe it or not, Tiger Woods." Trevino, in that list, tells you everything. There's one more detail worth mentioning. The nicknames everyone knows Trevino by, the Merry Mex and Super Mex. He didn't give himself those. Other golfers did. That's the thing about this video. Every name in it, Hogan, Nicklaus, Jacklin, Miller, Woods, had their own reasons to size Trevino up. Some were measuring themselves against him. And decades later, players who never shared the field with him are still trying to learn what he knew. The jokes were real. Trevino was funny, and he knew it, and he used it. But underneath all of that was a player good enough that the most decorated golfer in history didn't call him entertaining. He called him the hardest to beat.